Yo, what's going on guys, it's Cynical and welcome back to another video. Today for you guys, we're going to be taking a look at Kingdom Hearts 2 from different angles using a tool known as noclip.website, a literal website that allows us to free cam a lot of different areas and levels from a bunch of different games. This website does contain all of the different levels and areas from Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. I actually did a video on this, but for Kingdom Hearts 1 partway through last year, so if you guys haven't seen that, I'm going to put a link in the description down below. This allows us to take the camera out of bounds. Yes, this is an unofficial She Says video, and to take a look at the different developer techniques that we use to create certain illusions, as well as to be able to make set different things work in the ways of cutscenes. This kind of stuff's always really interesting. It allows us to also get some up-close shots of details that you might not have ever noticed before as well. This video is going to be split into two parts just because there is a lot to talk about. I'm not going to be going over literally every single area within Kingdom Hearts 2. I have compiled a list of the more interesting areas with specific things that I do want to talk about, but even still so, there is just too much to cover right here, so I'm going to have to split this into two parts. Second part should be out in the coming days. So the first world we're going to be looking at is the 100 Acre Woods, and the first area is Starry Hill, my all-time actually favorite area of the 100 Acre Wood. It looks super neat too, just real quick, when we actually zoom completely out. It almost looks like a little terrarium. Now there are two things that I want to talk about in this area specifically. The first is a really cool illusion technique that Square Enix used a lot throughout Kingdom Hearts 3 to give off the illusion of reflections. As you guys can see in the stream right here, we have the reflection of the moon with like the bridge and the sort of grass and stuff near the edge of the streamline, as well as the trees and whatnot. So these aren't proper reflections, and of course due to the hardware limitations and technology around this era, there wasn't actual proper reflections in a lot of different game engines. Specifically the game engine that Kingdom Hearts 2 ran on, it didn't use proper reflections. So to combat this, Square Enix actually used a really cool illusion technique to give off the illusion of reflections. So if we go underneath the map right here, we can see that there are basically the same assets like the trees and the grass and some of the bushes and even the moon. They are all duplicated underneath the map and flipped vertically, which is really cool. And then right on top is a translucent layer, that being of course the water right here, so that we can see underneath the map and the assets that are hiding underneath as well, being that of the moon, the trees, to then be able to give off the illusion of a reflection. I'll give a few more examples of this as we go through and talk about the different areas, because as I said, Square Enix used this quite a lot throughout Kingdom Hearts 2 where reflections were needed. The other thing I want to talk about is if we go inside of Starry Hill, we'll notice Pooh's house. The interior of Pooh's house is hiding within Starry Hill. This is another technique that developers use. Sometimes they store interiors or other rooms within inside of levels where certain cutscenes happen. And in this instance, in Starry Hill, there is actually a cutscene that happens within the same area of Starry Hill that uses the interior of Pooh's house. So the cutscene that I'm talking about is in Kingdom Hearts 2. I believe it's only one time where Pooh's house inside the interior is actually used, and that's when Pooh is sitting on the floor and he has like an almost out-of-body experience. That's him having a flashback to the time from Kingdom Hearts 1 when Pooh and the gang were sitting up on this log and they were saying goodbye to Sora leaving. This right here is Rabbit's house. There's nothing overly too interesting to talk about in regards to Rabbit's house, but I did want to get some real close-ups of these different signs. If you guys have paid attention, obviously you'll be able to see them in-game for yourself. But we have pumpkins, as well as cabbage, as well as carrots. It's very apparent that the animals of the 100 Acre Wood aren't exactly the best spellers. I mean, they're animals, can you blame them? So this right here is Kanga's house. I specifically wanted to talk about this little area over here. This is the area that is used for the balloon bounce minigame. If we actually go over to that area, because yes, it's a completely separate set, of course, this is where Sora will sort of jump on this little sheet to then bounce on the balloons to try to get as high as he possibly can. Now, what Square Enix did, which I really have to say big respect to, is they really pay close attention to like the outside areas that you'll go to in either a mini game or it's a completely separate area in itself, to make sure that those other connecting areas are visible from where Sora is. Even to the point of, if Sora were to use like the double jump aerial dodge to get high enough, he's obviously going to be able to just make out the sheet that he bounces on in the balloon bounce minigame. Of course, it's very low poly, and all of this is very low poly because you're not meant to be this close up. But you'll notice that specific technique used, referencing the different geographic locations in the world from a distance with actual proper detail. Square Enix are kind of a masterclass in this when it comes to any of the sets that you see within the Final Fantasy games of the PS2 time, or of course the Kingdom Hearts games. I do want to talk about this area just real quick to really show how much detail went into this just one little mini game set. Of course, you won't really be paying too much attention to any of this when you're playing the minigame because you're playing a minigame, but honestly, Kingdom Hearts 2 has aged really, really well. I wanted to show off the Blustery Rescue set area that is used for, of course, the Blustery Rescue minigame where Sora is floating on a balloon and all of the big tree stumps kind of float his way. You gotta smack them, as well as the different beehives to collect the honey, and eventually, of course, rescue Pooh in the process. Now, the minigame is like sort of side-scrolling, so it will be progressing ever so slightly like this, and at the very end of the minigame, you arrive at Piglet's house. I thought I'd show off this set from a different angle to show you guys the technique that Square Enix used to make the backdrop convincing. These are all just 2D cutouts of trees positioned in a multitude of different layers with a bigger forest background and an even bigger sky and hill backdrop, with clouds, of course, there too, that are moving to make the set even more convincing. However, though, the most interesting area, hands down, of the 100 Acre Wood is, of course, the Honey Slider, and to be able to explore it with the free camera is really, really interesting, because there was a lot of different techniques that obviously Square pulled off here. Now, Sora will, of course, jump out of this part of the book, and he's riding on the honey pot, and he'll follow this arrow. You'll be going all over the place. Of course, a lot of this won't appear like this in the actual scenario itself. But one thing that I really tried to pay attention to a lot when I was playing through this minigame was the different paragraphs of text that appear all throughout the storybook that you're writing on top of, because yeah, you're literally sort of, I guess, writing through a storybook on a honey pot. And I'm going to go out on a whim here and just assume that these are proper paragraphs from different Winnie the Pooh storybooks, and they are all readable as well, which is just really, really cool. Of course, you're never going to have any time to be able to read any of these paragraphs. Some of them are less readable than others, to a point where you just cannot read them at all, but others are readable. Again, you just wouldn't have any time to be able to read any of this, but it really does give off the awesome illusion that you are going through a storybook. Keep in mind too that some assets will all randomly be jumbled in some areas where it won't totally make sense. That's because some of the assets do require certain different animations, which within this no-clip viewer, obviously the animations for specific assets aren't working. Stuff like the animations for like some clouds will work, and we can actually pause all of this if we want to. You'll also see the rain and the sort of water ripples right here. All of that kind of stuff's working, but like individual assets, we won't actually see them properly working in this no-clip player. But yeah, it's super cool. Here's all the large letters that randomly appear throughout. If we go underneath this page too, the space is even bigger than you kind of think. So there we go. It was taking a little while to load in, but yeah, this is absolutely huge. This is, of course, the cliff where you end off the mini game. So Sora will come screaming down this cliff, and that right there is the ending. Even with the two ending signs right here, where you stop. Again, fantastic spelling. I absolutely love it. And what is this? Ending plus? This is certainly the largest set piece within the 100 Acre Wood. So next up is Agrobar. So to start off, I thought I'd show you guys the Jafar Genie boss area. This is absolutely massive. I wanted to show this off to you guys just to show you how big it is. Of course, when you're actually in the boss fight itself, you can do a decent amount of exploring for yourself and really get a good sense of just how big the set piece is. But to actually be able to get up close with the city is something that is super, super, super neat. And even though everything is just so low poly, like the detail just isn't there, it is pretty impressive for its time, I do have to say. And what's even cooler is too, depending on where you are as Sora from certain angles, you might just be able to make out the different paths and I guess like topiary trees and shrubbage and stuff that's within the palace grounds, and maybe even just see that little fountain right there. But really, you're gonna be so distracted in the fight itself that you'll never notice any of this. Is any of this really necessary? No, but I guess that's what makes Square Enix, when they want to be, AAA creators. Even down to like the area, the palace gates where you fight the Blizzard and Fire Lord. That's all here with like the perfect amount of shrubs, 4 on each side. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. The hills off in the distance are simply just angled 2-dimensional pictures of sand, which is super cool. But again, it gives off that illusion that there are really mounds of sand off in the distance in the desert. So this right here is the palace walls area, exiting out into, of course, the desert. We have a little oasis sitting right here that, of course, yes, you can see from the playable space. As well as that, that's where the sand-swept ruins are located. So obviously, when we're playing as Sora, we'll take this path, which, of course, there are some shrubs right here. Initially, these shrubs are here to block the player from being able to go to the sand-swept ruins up until a point in the game where the shrubs then are removed. And this area can then be accessible. And this part right here obviously goes over to the Cave of Wonders. But where the sand-swept ruins would be geographically located, they have put in like just a little 2D picture of the ruins so that in the playable space, of course, it looks like off in the distance there is some ruins. I really love this technique. This right here is, of course, the famous Cave of Wonders. And just like Sand-Swept Ruins, we have the same going on here for Agrobar. It's just a little 2D picture off in the distance. And this set piece is really, really cool with the different layers of the clouds, the dark clouds kind of swirling around the level to make the player feel like they're actually encapsulated in what looks like a massive storm. And to be able to actually go down the Panther's throat is something I never thought I would actually be doing. Next up is the Valley of Stone. So I wanted to show off this for the sole reason of just showing you guys how big some of these levels actually are in comparison to the actual playable space. So as you can see, the playable space is the little brown strip down there, and this is the actual size of the level itself. Obviously, the further we go, the less detail. The closer we go to the playable space, the more detail. There are no true backs to any of these stone pillars because, of course, the player is never meant to see the backs of them. The Chasm of Challenges is really, really cool to see with a free cam, to see all of the multiple platforms that Sora would, of course, go through, having to defeat waves of Heartless to progress within the time limit. As well as the big, I don't know, rainbow-colored cylinder that this level is just sitting inside of. Very, very neat to see. This is absolutely hilarious. Now, as we know, the Pittler in Agrobar is greedy beyond belief, right? And judging by this man's shop, yeah, he's got a lot of different wealthy shiz. However, what if I told you that the Pittler all of this time was hiding a dirty little secret? If we take the camera out, we can see that this man has an absolute treasury, dude. Now, I've tried to figure this out for the life of me. If there is a certain cutscene within Agrobar that uses these backspaces, but there isn't. If you go through all of the cutscenes in Agrobar, there is not one single cutscene that uses these backspaces with these gold piles. I'm absolutely sure there's probably a reason as to why these rooms are here. To be honest, it could be some unused area that at one time Square Enix were planning to use probably for a cutscene, but ended up just scrapping the idea. But like, no, his shop isn't just this, and it ain't just that. It's this entire monstrosity, dude. Forget Moneybags from Spyro, dude. Like, the Pittler is the real true Moneybags. This is insane. Next up is Atlantica. Now, there's not really that much that I want to show off in regards to Atlantica because there just isn't really anything overly too interesting because it's not really a world per se. We're going to start off with the shore area that is used in a few cutscenes. It's kind of neat to be able to explore this because, of course, we only get to see it briefly within cutscenes. The human castle, as well as being able to see the actual shore itself. There's a lot of detail that goes into a lot of these sets, even if they're only just used for, like, what is literally a few seconds. Next is Wrath of the Sea. This is kind of cool to be able to explore outside of the big watery tornado that is going on. Of course, we don't get to explore this area at all because it's not really a boss fight, it's more of a sing-off, but yeah, this is where you verse Ursula in Kingdom Hearts 2. If we take the camera outside of the whirlpool, we can get a good look at the different sort of shipwrecks that are positioned around the edge of the level. With, of course, also a shipwreck sort of backdrop as well, all to give off this illusion that off in the distance, within the many layers of whirlpool, sort of vortex thing that's going on right here, it looks like in the distance there are a lot of different crashed, broken shipwrecks. Last up is the wedding ship. I have showed this off on the channel many years ago, but this is an unused set. I'm assuming that Square were planning on putting in the wedding segment from The Little Mermaid, but that idea ended up getting scrapped. However, before it got scrapped, they, did come up with the whole development of the actual ship itself. I'm assuming this was going to be used as a cutscene though, because on one side it's not really modeled at all. Generally, if you are in an area or a set piece where there is like unmodeled panels or parts of like a certain object or something, it means that that object is only meant to be viewed from a specific angle outside of the camera's view. Either that or this is just completely unfinished, but for the most part there is actually a lot of detail here, especially right at the back of the ship. Next up is Beast's Castle. So I wanted to show off another technique that Square likes to use. Of course, throughout the game, we go through many doors and hallways. If it is a door that is slightly open or an open doorway per se, we should be able to see the corresponding area that connects to the area the player is already in, off in the distance. So if we go into the parlor room, it is actually a part of the entrance hall level. That's because at a certain part in the Beast's Castle world, this door is just slightly open. You can see that there is an extra door sitting right here, because at one stage in the game, this door is actually closed, but in other stages, the door is for the most part open. When the door is slightly open, we can actually see through into the parlor room, but it would be a little bit awkward if beyond the door it's just a black space. So a technique that Square has used, and this is also used in many other video games, is that they have put a significantly lower detailed version of the parlor room so that if you are just peeking through the door, it looks like the parlor room is through that walkway. Again, this is used a lot throughout Kingdom Hearts 2. Another example of which is if we go outside into the courtyard, the same technique is being used here. A significantly lower detailed version of the courtyard exists because you can see through these windows. Now, I wanted to talk about the parlor and to give an example of, I guess, the accuracy that Square Enix shoot for, to, of course, replicate a lot of these different rooms, areas, and worlds of these Disney universes within Kingdom Hearts. Now, a lot of the different pictures and portraits that appear within Beast's Castle, some, not all, are literally one-to-one from the different paintings and portraits that you see within the Beauty and the Beast movie. And a lot of this attention to detail from if there is a certain area of that particular Disney movie that appears within Kingdom Hearts for the corresponding world. So the example I want to give is the picture of this ship right here is literally within the Beauty and the Beast movie. It looks slightly different. It kind of tells me that this is Square Enix's own rendition of that exact ship. But in regards to these two portraits, I believe in this picture right here, it should be a picture of like an old-fashioned soldier from way back when. And in this picture right here, it should be a lady standing in a dress. So yeah, not absolutely everything is going to be one-to-one. But if you sat down one day, and let's say we'll just use Beast's Castle for an example, went through Beast's Castle and going into the different rooms and areas, and then comparing it to the different rooms and areas that appear in Beauty and the Beast, you'd be taken back just how much accuracy Square Enix shoot for. Another accuracy example is the portrait of Beast when he was a human. This doesn't appear in any cutscene whatsoever, it's just simply sitting here in Beast's room, and yes, it is scratched just as it appears in the movie. A lot of the portraits, though, that are within this room aren't totally accurate, but in regards to, let's say, this little hanging banner thing, that's accurate. As well as even the positioning of this curtain rail that is knocked down with the broken cabinet that's sitting right here, all accurate. I did also want to show off the garden labyrinth that is outside of these two doors, just beyond the balcony, because we can of course see through these doors right here beyond the balcony. In the actual Beauty and the Beast movie, though, there isn't a labyrinth per se. There is definitely a garden that appears in a scene just beyond a balcony when Beast and Belle, I believe, are standing on the balcony outside of the ballroom, which that's geographically located just below this balcony. It would probably be somewhere about here. And you do see some bushes and whatnot off in the background, but you don't see a labyrinth. It does make me think that Square had to improvise, but yes, a massive labyrinth type garden setup with a lot of different fountains, looking really neat. And just to kind of show you guys what I was talking about in the sense of the garden that does appear in the movie of Beauty and the Beast, this is it, just outside of the ballroom. Belle and Beast are kind of standing about here, and yeah, you can see all of these different bushes and whatnot in that scene. But what I wanted to talk about in the ballroom section is the mural that is on top of the roof. I never knew this was here until I was able to use this no clip. So that's kind of cool. There are a couple of other things that I want to show you guys on roofs in KH2 in this video that I never noticed before, because really you're never going to look up at this, and it is a little bit different if you go into the boss version of the ballroom. Yeah, that mural just doesn't exist at all. I was kind of thinking because you get up high to jump onto the chandelier for the Dark Thorn fight, maybe you'll see that mural when you're up high. But no, there really isn't any chance you'll ever see this mural, unless of course you go into first person mode and look up. This room is also using the reflection technique, so we can only just make out the reflection of the pillars that should be here, but aren't. But you guys will notice that if we go underneath the map, all of these pillars are sitting right underneath the floor, as well as the walls and the door. So I have shown off this specific set of Destiny Islands quite a bit here on the channel, but just for those of you that haven't seen this, and to give us more of a controlled version of which, I thought I'd show it off once again. Now, Destiny Islands does appear a few times throughout the game in Kingdom Hearts 2, but what was one of the coolest thing about Destiny Islands appearing in KH2 was we got to see that, yeah, there is such thing as a main island of this world. The islands that the kids were on in Kingdom Hearts 1 is not the main island, and of course it's not really where they live. Now, we do sort of get to see in Kingdom Hearts 1 that obviously Sora, Riku, and Kairi don't particularly live on this island. They live somewhere off in the distance, because of course we do see a cutscene where it is at night and there's a storm coming, and then Sora's freaking out about the boats or whatever, and where potentially Kairi and Riku are. So it gives us an indication that the kids actually do live somewhere off of the shore of that island itself, and that they go out here to sort of play around in their free time. And this is a very low volley version of actual Destiny Islands. But in Kingdom Hearts 2, we got to see that main island, that proper main hub home island where, like, I don't know, the populace of Destiny Islands actually lives. And I really hope to God, I've been begging and begging and begging for this, that Destiny Islands returns, because I want to be able to explore the actual island, the proper mainland of Destiny Islands. But of course, the most detailed part of specifically the Ocean's Road area is this one right here, because of course there is a cutscene that takes place with Selfie as well as Kyrie in their school uniforms, sort of talking about how she used to go out to the island off in the distance and hang out with a boy. This is when, you know, she's sort of struggling to remember Sora and whatnot. But what is cool is off into the distance, these are very low detailed 2D images of what is the town of the actual mainland. But yeah, we can see some like large buildings as well as a star that really sticks out a lot. So again, I really do hope that this becomes a proper world at some point, with the large volcano off in the distance as well, with some power lines. There's a more detailed version of the actual shoreline of the main island. This was used for when, of course, Kyrie is sending off the message in the bottle, as well as being kidnapped by Axel. Next up is Disney Castle. So this is Mickey's little study, his library area, and again, the reflection technique is being used here, as there is what looks like a very clean, polished kind of marble floor going on with that checkered pattern. The other thing I wanted to show off is the classic photos of Mickey and Minnie sitting on the desk right here. We have talked about these quite a few times, but for those of you who have never seen this, here it is. Next is the wilderness area. This is, of course, where you fight the lingering will. I kind of wanted to just zoom out to give you guys a really good view of the wilderness area. This little space right here is, of course, the playable area for the boss fight, and then everything around it is all just scenic set pieces for visual stimulation. But yeah, it's a massive chunk of the Keyblade graveyard, even though so little of it is actually used. Of course, this specific playable space was again then reused for Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, that appears in multiple different cutscenes in BBS, as well as used for the Vanitas Remnant boss fight. It's always cool to get a nice zoom out of the Station of Awakening and Dive to Heart areas, but I wanted to specifically showcase this one. This is the Station of Calling, obviously the Roxas tutorial area, mainly to just point out the common use of the colors blue, red, and green. We've talked about this in the past, but here is another example. The colors of blue, red, and green consistently reoccur throughout Kingdom Hearts. Red generally referring to that of Sora, blue generally referring to that of Donald, and green generally referring to that of Goofy. But these color usages can refer to a lot of different other things throughout the games too, like blue for Aqua, red or orangey type colors for Terra, and green for Ventus. Next up is Halloweentown. So this is the graveyard section. I wanted to point out specifically these three little signs: Henbane, Witch Hazel, and Deadly Nightshade. Now, I have never noticed these at all from my many years of playing Kingdom Hearts 2. I have definitely noticed the little dog kennel tombstone here of Zero, of course. But specifically, these signs right here, I've never noticed. Now, from the actual movie The Nightmare Before Christmas, Sally is trying to escape Dr. Finkelstein's lab. And to do that, she needs to create a poison. So she goes to the graveyard to find a poisonous herb and ends up taking some Deadly Nightshade. So yeah, this is a little recreation of that herb patch that appears in the actual movie, which again, a nice little attention to detail thing right there from Square, keeping up with that authenticity. I also wanted to show off the Hinterlands area to give you guys nice close-ups of these other doors that appear in the trees that represent other holidays. So the one with the big turkey right here is to obviously represent that of Thanksgiving, with what looks like a hat or something right there on the ground. So it is kind of cool that they all have different little items lying beneath the door to represent what holiday they are. The egg door obviously represents that of Easter, with some Easter eggs sitting there. We have a 4-leafed clover with some mushrooms to represent what I'm assuming is St. Patrick's Day. We have a big love heart door, Valentine's, with a little gift on the floor right there in some pink wrapping paper. And then this candle, I'm assuming this is probably Guy Fawkes, just with the other candles that are sitting underneath. It could be maybe Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year or something, but I have a feeling it is probably Guy Fawkes, just with the stars that are within the candle with the wick on top. And the last area that I want to show off for Halloweentown is Yuletide Hill, again with the geographical referencing right here. So obviously if we make our way down the hill, we're going to be in front of Santa's house, Santa's workshop. But to give off the illusion where it looks like the actual town square for Christmas Town is like down a hill type thing, is what they've done is, of course, it's another 2D flat image, but it's slightly bent a bit. To give it that illusion from when you are on top of the hill, it looks like it's off there in the distance at the bottom of the hill. Next up is the Villain's Veil from within side of Maleficent's massive Heartless Tower. It's really cool to be able to sort of get a good shot of this nice and up close. Obviously this set right here appears in quite a few cutscenes with conversations between Pete and Maleficent. And we can also see what is, you guys can assume, a 2D representation of Radiant Guard and Hollow Bastion off in the distance. Now, specifically talking about that little 2D reference right there, if we go over to the Dark Depths, this is of course the area in which you fight Sephiroth and a whole other bunch of Malagas ends up happening, with the big Heartless building off there into the distance with all of the debris and rubble below, with all of these little Heartless. Yes, these are all meant to be Heartless down below. But talking about that 2D reference of Hollow Bastion, for any area that is the Dark Depths or before, for that little 2D reference, there is animated waterfalls coming out of the side of the city. Now, honestly speaking, they really didn't have to animate these waterfalls. I just like this attention to detail stuff, honestly, quite a lot. But because, of course, you can see fairly clearly Hollow Bastion off in the distance, if you were to be like sort of standing here as Sora, you'd maybe just be able to make out the waterfalls actually moving. But considering the fact that like with the resolutions that PlayStation 2 games run at, which is generally 480p or 360p, you're not going to notice that very subtle animation of the waterfall in the city. So I really come to appreciate that kind of stuff. It'd be a little bit easier to recognize that nowadays just with the HD versions of the older games with the higher resolution. But generally speaking, you're probably moving around and, I don't know, you're involved in the boss fight with Sephiroth, or you're just probably, I don't know, walking through the menus. Like, you're not going to stand there and like stare at Hollow Bastion. So really, these waterfalls honestly could have just been flat still images, but no, Square Enix literally decided to animate these bad boys, so I really do respect that. This right here is the Burrow area. I wanted to point out that if of course you are specifically looking towards it, you're going to notice it, but for the most part, most people are just going to be fighting Heartless here and rushing through the area in itself. We can actually see the broken wall off in the distance, as well as the back of the Duck's shop up here in the shopping area. Again, I'm loving all of the attention to detail with the geographic location referencing. It is very nice, and it makes you feel like you really are in a certain part of this world that corresponds accurately to where that previous area that you were in is. So I really like how Square Enix do this. Same also can be said for the marketplace. There is a very, very, very low quality version of the Heartless Tower just off in the distance with the different ravines and stuff for where the Great Moor area is. But yes, that broken wall is still there. And also too, we can see the burrow with the little Bailey area, as well as the fence and the crane. Even down to like the little entrance right here. Like this is where you would walk out into the burrow, coming from, of course, the shopping area. And like you're never gonna see this either, but like Merlin's house would be about here. They've even got the ramp that comes up from the bottom section, which I don't know why they have to do this, but I guess it is, again, for geographic referencing. Next up is Castle Oblivion. Yes, Castle Oblivion, there is a 3D model of it, the outside at least, within the files of Kingdom Hearts 2, and that's because this appears within one of Roxas's flashback cutscenes. But here it is, it's all completely modeled, and it's really neat to be able to get a very good view of the outside of the castle, because this doesn't appear really all too often, or at least to give us a really good sense of the architecture that is present here for Castle Oblivion, obviously knowing that this was once the land of departure. This specific part of the castle, though, really gives off heavy land of departure vibes. But it's such a wacky looking design, man. Like, there are just triangular roofs sticking out left, right, and center. I don't even know what's going on here. This tower's leaning on its side. This tower's leaning on its side. Real cool looking like little demon design thing right here. Even with its like hands sticking out with big horns, it's really neat. The very last area that I want to show off for part 1 is the underground facility. This is at the bottom of the computer area from within inside of Hollow Bastion's castle near Anson's study. The main reason why I wanted to show this off, yes, you can come into this area and sort of like explore it as Sora, but there's not really much going on down here. I believe from memory there's like a chest or something. Correct me if I'm wrong, but underneath there is some interesting stuff. Now, this is specifically from Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. There was an additional cutscene that was added partway through the game where, and this just wasn't necessary, where like Xemnas is walking down here for like 2 minutes down this spiral walkway all the way down. I mean, honestly speaking, they really didn't need to add this whole spiral area. They really didn't. But I guess it gives off that idea that the Chamber of Repose is in a very secure, secret location, a part of the Hollow Bastion castle. So I guess that's kind of what it's insinuating. And he was mumbling and jumbling as he was walking down. But there is a door right here, and this goes into the cell area. This is where the children who were kidnapped from throughout Radiant Garden were taken to and experimented on, including Kairi. Yes, Kairi found herself in one of these cells at one point. Of course, this was a little bit Ansem, but more so Apprentice Xehanort's doing, experimenting on the hearts of children, trying to figure out how the Arc device works from what we saw in Melody of Memory. And this is even the location that Subject X, who most of us assume at this point, just with the extra information that we got from the ending of Union Cross, is Skuld, where she spent her time. And yes, you can even go inside of the cells to really give a good little simulation of what these children unfortunately went through. Bad men, horrible men. But yeah, the detail in this space is really impressive, even though it was only used for a few second cutscene. Again, too, the reflection technique is being used here, and then the Chamber of Repose with the doors containing chains and the Nobody Sigil. This is where, of course, Xemnas would come to try regain his past memories from his past self being Terra, and also talk to Aqua's broken armor after she threw herself into the realm of darkness. That armor was collected and stored within the Chamber of Repose. Yes, Xemnas would literally come to this room to talk to inanimate armor. It has been too long, good friend. Now guys, that has been part 1 of exploring Kingdom Hearts 2 Out of Bounds. There is just so many interesting things to kind of look into, even though I have siphoned through literally every single level of the game. Even doing that, this is an extremely long video, so there will be a part 2 in the next few days, where we will go through the other interesting things that I found from the worlds that I have yet not featured. Hopefully you guys are having an absolutely fantastic day. I'm Cynical, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.